Astatyadeshatarini.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, श्री
Jai,
प्रभुपाद की जय।
Jai.
ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवम् Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna.
Hare
Okay,
Krishna.
so
Pranam Guruji, Danda.
done. Okay, so yesterday we discussed the remaining 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. So we've been discussing Kleshagni, then Shubhada. So somebody can say, what are the 4 aspects of Shubhada?
It is Prerana, the person engages in welfare activity for the whole world, and he's others are attached to him. Anuraktata and Shubha, all fortune will be there, and there will be Sukham, happiness.
What is the third one?
Shubha, fortune, prosperity.
No.
Happiness in Krishna consciousness, produce good quality.
Yes,
Compassion.
produces good quality. Sadguna. Yes, so these are the 4 aspects of Shubhada. Sarva Jagdam Priyanam, Anuraktata, Sadguna, and Sukham. So we also discussed about different types of Sukham and material happiness, Brahmananda, the happiness of devotional service. Then we discussed Moksha Laghutakrit, how pure devotional service derives even the concept of liberation. Then we discussed Sudurlabha, Bhav Bhakti, especially very rare. Why? Why is Bhav Bhakti very rare?
Because of 2 reasons, Pruji. One is that even if it is performed for a long period of time without attachment, it is like we do not get pure devotional service. And second reason is, even when done with full attachment, Krishna does not award it very easily, because Krishna is not very cheap. It takes time for it to be awarded.
Yes, and Krishna becomes purchased by such a devotee. So therefore, it's not so cheap. And then Sandrang Visheshatma, that's the happiness on the stage of prema, incalculable condensed bliss, and finally Sri Krishna Akarshani, pure devotional service attracts even Krishna. Okay, so now we're going to the next chapter. So the next chapter, chapter 2, is the first stages of devotion. So 3 types of bhakti: sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prem bhakti. That's basically the first paragraph that Srila Prabhupada is explaining. Okay, so then we already discussed this. The Eastern Division, Bhagavad Bhakti Veda, has 4 laharis or waves. Samanya Bhakti, Sadhana Bhakti, Bhava Bhakti, and Prem Bhakti. So Samanya Bhakti Introduction Chapter 1 is what we have covered. And so now we are beginning Sadhana Bhakti, which is the major portion of this section from 2 to 16. Okay, now the first point here is eligibility for Krishna consciousness. So if somebody can read from Prabhupada's book, second paragraph.
Aishwarya Mataji.
Second paragraph.
Second paragraph, Prabhu.
Yes.
In this connection, Srila Rupa Goswami suggests that the person eligible for Krishna or devotional service can be classified by this particular taste. He says that devotional service is a continual process from one's previous life. No one can take a devotional service unless he has had some previous connection with it. For example, suppose in this life I practice devotional service to some extent, even though it is not 100% perfectly performed. Whatever I have done will not be lost. In my next life, from the very point where I stop in this life, I shall begin again. In this way, there is always continuity. But even if there is no continuity, if only by chance a person takes interest in a pure devotee's instruction, he can be accepted and can advance in devotional service. Anyway, for persons who have a natural taste for understanding books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, devotional service is easier than for those who are simply accustomed to mental speculation and argumentative process. To
Okay.
support.
Okay. So this is eligibility for beginning Krishna consciousness. So as Prabhupada is explaining, that devotional service is a continual process. And so therefore, if somebody has practiced devotional service in previous life, then obviously in this life he continues from that point. And so once again, he develops a taste for devotional activities. And so he once again takes to the practice of devotional service. And Prabhupada says that even if there is no continuity, if only by chance a person takes interest in pure devotee's instruction, he can be accepted. So even if one has had no devotional credits from the previous life, but somehow if one gets attracted to a pure devotee and follows his instructions, he can begin devotional service. So here, this from Waves of Devotion. This reasoning may appear to be circular. One requires attraction to begin devotional service, but one requires devotional service to achieve an attraction. So in order to perform devotional service, some attraction is required. But how one will develop the attraction? By some devotional service. So then how does devotional service begin? So devotional service begins with the causeless mercy of a devotee. By this mercy, one may unknowingly execute devotional service. Krishna, Agyat Sukruti, and thus develop a slight taste or attraction to bhakti. So that's always the beginning. The beginning is the causeless mercy of a devotee. Okay, so ultimately somewhere it has to begin. So the beginning point is always the causeless mercy of a devotee. So what is the causeless mercy of a devotee? The causeless mercy of a devotee is that he engages a person in some devotional activity. And when he engages in some devotional activity, that's how he gets Agyat Sukruti. Agyat means unknowingly. Even without his knowing, he gets Sukruti. That's the beginning of devotional service. And that's why we find that Srila Prabhupada has started so many activities within our movement where people's Agyat Sukruti can begin. So therefore, there is book distribution, Harinam Sankirtan, Prasadam distribution. So of course, these are the three main pillars of the Hare Krishna movement. That is how Srila Prabhupada started the movement. Srila Prabhupada started the movement basically with Kirtan in the Tompkins Square Park, Harinam. And so people heard it, they got attracted. And then there was some prasadam. So there was prasadam distribution, and of course the books came a little later. But then, of course, Srila Prabhupada had his first canto books even before he went to the West, and he took those books with him and went to the West. So Srila Prabhupada started all these activities so that the Agyat Sukruti of people can begin. And of course, Srila Prabhupada also started Jagannath Rath Yatras all over the world. And so we know in Jagannath Rath Yatra, practically thousands of people, they get an opportunity to hear the holy names, have darshan of the lordships, get some prasadam, associate with devotees, get some books. And so all these activities are opportunities for people to get Agyat Sukruti. So this is all, of course, the causeless mercy of Srila Prabhupada. And of course, we can say in Parampara from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so, just like if there's a Harinam party or there's Jagannath Rath Yatra, now it's not that all the people who have darshan of the Lord or hear the holy name had planned to take part. No. There could be so many people who may never had any plan to take part in the Rath Yatra. But then they just happen to be there. They just happen to be there. And then they hear the holy name and they may get some prasad. So that's how Agyat Sukruti begins. Even without their knowing, they get the Sukruti. Even without their knowing, the Sukruti begins. And then that's the first touch with devotional service, and then it could, and then there could be further, because of that initial touch, then there's some more attraction to devotional service. And then because of attraction, devotional service, then once again, they may get a chance to perform some service and more Agyat Sukruti. And that's how the Agyat Sukruti keeps on maturing. And then when it becomes sufficiently mature, then one develops a great taste for devotional practices. How much time it will take for the Agyat Sukruti to mature, we don't know. We don't know. May take a few years, may take a few lifetimes, we don't know. But at a certain point, the Agyat Sukruti matures, and then when the Agyat Sukruti matures, then one develops a great taste. Then one will actually search out for the association of devotees and then begin devotional practices and so on. So that's how devotional service begins. So it all begins with the causeless mercy of the pure devotee. And so therefore, very important for us that we don't underestimate the value of these activities that Srila Prabhupada started. Because in the present age, definitely this has been observed in the recent times, that devotees are not so enthusiastic to go on Harinam parties on the streets or book distribution. Of course, Jagannath Rath Yatras are going on. But then, but as we have been discussing in Bhagavad Gita, the tendency is to be very fruitive. The tendency is to be very fruitive. And so, because we don't see immediate results of these activities, one thinks, oh, what's the use? What's the effect? But then by these activities, we are laying the seeds of Ajnat Sukruti, which will mature in the future. Shrutagiri Prabhu tells his pastime when he was in Australia. So they were distributing quite a good number of books. And so, but there were not many devotees in the temple. So he asked Srila Prabhupada, so we're distributing so many books, but there are hardly anybody in the temple. So why is that so? Prabhupada said, that's none of your business. Your business is simply to execute the orders of the spiritual master. That's all. The results are for Krishna to take care. So therefore, we perform these services because Srila Prabhupada wanted them. And so we're simply trying to follow his instructions, and that's what will purify us. And then, as far as the results are concerned, that's up to Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, and ultimately Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But then the results will eventually come. But the fact is that by performing these activities, we are laying the seeds of Ajnat Sukruti. And then at a certain point of time, they will mature, and that's how people come. So the important point is, yes, the causeless mercy of the pure devotee is the initial factor which enables a person to begin devotional service. So attraction of taste is a qualification for making a commitment to the systematic cultivation of sadhana bhakti. However, there is no qualification required for receiving causeless mercy and beginning Ajnat Sukruti. Okay. So yes, when one actually wants to practice serious devotional service, then yes, there has to be the attraction taste for commitment. But for beginning the Ajnat Sukruti, causeless mercy, that's no qualification. Just anybody on the streets can get that Ajnat Sukruti, and that's his beginning. Why exactly those people are on the streets to hear the Harinam or see Lord Jagannath, we don't know. But then the fact remains that that's how Ajnat Sukruti begins. So spiritual advancement is eternal. The attraction to Krishna gained from previous advancement devotional service remains in one's heart. In a future life, it impels one to seek the association of devotees and take up the practice from where one left off. Thus, we can see devotees coming to the Krishna conscious movement who begin at different levels of advancement. Okay, so we see within our movement, we see how the devotees who come and then immediately they take up the devotional service and they progress very fast. Others take more time. So we see all varieties. Just like we hear about His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj, how he came apparently quite late in sense in 1977 or towards the end of 76. But Srila Prabhupada recognized that here is a very serious person. And then Srila Prabhupada gave him first and second initiation both at the same time in the beginning of 77, and then a few months later, Prabhupada gave him sannyas. And the same thing with Gaur Govind Maharaj. Gaur Govind Maharaj, of course, if you have read the history, then he's coming from a Vaishnava family. And so when he came to ISKCON, and just initial few interactions, and Srila Prabhupada was ready to give him sannyas. And the other senior devotees, they said, oh, but he's a new boy. Prabhupada said, no, you are new, not he. So yes, so Prabhupada could recognize that he's coming from a previous history of devotional service. So that's how different devotees come at different levels. And then, of course, everyone has a chance to advance from that point. Okay. But even if there's no continuity, if only by chance a person takes interest in pure devotional instruction, he can be excellent advanced. So in this connection, Rupa Goswami quotes this verse from the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Yadrichaya mat kathadau jata shraddhastuya puman na nirvinno nati sakto bhakti yogo siddhidaha. If somehow or other by good fortune one develops faith in hearing and chanting my glories, such a person, being neither very disgusted with nor attached to material life, should achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. Okay, so here the word is used, yadrichya. So this is a constant word which is often used in whenever the point of beginning devotional service is concerned. Yadrichya means somehow or other. Somehow or other. So why exactly one takes to devotional service, why another doesn't take, we cannot give any pinpointed reason. Of course, Krishna knows, but we cannot say. So therefore, yadrichya, or as the other famous verse, brahmanda brahmite kona bhagyavanaji, some fortunate soul, that's all. So it's somehow by good fortune one gets the Jnat Sukruti and then one progresses. So yadrichya, somehow or other. Okay, so therefore here it says, na nirvinno nati sakto. Na nirvinno means not being very disgusted with material life. And nati sakta, na asakta means not too attached to material life. So these are the, you could say, conducive factors for beginning devotional service. Not too disgusted with material life, not too attached to material life. What will be the results? Please read.
Anand Prabhuji. Anand Jaraman Prabhuji.
Yeah. Yes, Prabhu. Sorry, I had time unmuting.
Yes, please.
Those who become disgusted with material life take to impersonal philosophical speculation and rigorously try to stamp out any trace of personal existence. Those who are still attached to material sense gratification try to purify themselves by offering the fruits of their ordinary activities to the Supreme. A first-class candidate for pure devotional service, on the other hand, is neither completely disgusted with nor attached to
material life. Okay,
material.
so somebody who's too disgusted with material life, there's a tendency towards liberation. Because he's too frustrated with material life, he wants liberation, he wants to get out of the material world. So there is a good chance that he may take to the impersonal path and just want liberation. So that's the path of jnana. And somebody who's too attached to material life, then he takes the path of karma, fruitive activities, because he wants sense gratification. So therefore, Lord Krishna himself is telling Uddhava in this verse that the conducive factors for beginning devotional service, one is neither too disgusted with nor too attached to material life. Okay, continue please. Or somebody else can read.
Abhishek Prabhuji.
He does not desire to pursue ordinary material existence any further, because it cannot avoid real happiness. Nevertheless, a candidate for devotional service does not give up all hope for perfecting personal existence. A person who avoids the two extremes of material attachment and impersonal reaction to material attachment, and who somehow or other gets the association of pure devotees, faithfully hearing their message, is a good candidate for going back home, back to Godhead, and described here by the Lord.
Okay, fine. So those are the two extremes, material attachment and impersonal reaction. On the other hand, if someone gets the association of pure devotees, hears and follows, then he can begin devotional service. Okay, somebody else read this.
Priyanka Mataji.
Once some disciples said to Srila Prabhupada, Brahmananda Brahmite Kono Bhagyavan Brahmand Brahmite Kono Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Beej. Only someone who is very fortunate gets the seed of bhakti by the mercy of Guru and Krishna. So the disciples said to Srila Prabhupada, we are not fortunate. Actually, we are very unfortunate. So
how could we get bhakti? So Srila Prabhupada said, I have created a good fortune. So yes, so even if, as we already read, even if there has been no connection from the previous life, somehow one comes into the association of pure devotee and takes their instruction seriously, then yes, the devotional service can begin. So a quote from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kona bhagye karo samsara shayon mukha hoy, sadhu sange tabe krishne rati upajay. By good fortune, again the same word, by good fortune, bhagye, kona bhagye. So exact reason is not known. Somehow one becomes fortunate. By good fortune, one becomes eligible to cross the ocean of nations. And when one's term of material existence decreases, one may get an opportunity to associate with pure devotees. By such association, one's attraction to Krishna is awakened. Okay, this is about the three kinds of Agnat Sukruti. Okay, somebody read it.
Advait Gaur Prabhuji.
This is not a must that you must know it, but anyway, just one could give away.
Yes, Prabhuji. Eligibility for Krishna consciousness. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur explains this point. Is this bhagya, fortune, the result of an accident or something else? In the scriptures, devotional service and pious activity are considered fortunate. Pious activities can be divided into three categories. Pious activities that awaken one's dormant Krishna consciousness are called Bhakti Unmukhi Sukriti. Pious activities that bestow material opulence are called Bhogonmukhi Sukriti. And pious activities that enable the living entity to merge into the existence of the Supreme are called Mokshonmukhi Sukriti. These last two awards of pious activity are not actually fortunate. Pious activities are fortunate when they help one become Krishna conscious. The good fortune of Bhakti Unmukhi is attainable only when one comes in contact with a devotee. By associating with a devotee, willingly or unwillingly, one advances in devotional service and thus one's dormant Krishna consciousness is awakened.
Okay, so these are the three types of Sukruti. And so depending on what follows, then they have the specific names. Bhogonmukhi means if by performing that particular activity, if more sense enjoyment, bhoga follows, then it's called Bhogonmukhi. If moksha becomes the result, then mokshanmukhi. And if bhakti becomes the result, then bhaktionmukhi. So when one comes in association with the devotee, then and one performs service, some service, then that's how the bhaktionmukhi Sukruti begins, and that's what becomes the beginning stage of devotional service, which eventually matures. Okay, now coming to the definition of sadhana bhakti. So this is Rupa Goswami's definition of sadhana bhakti. Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sa sadhana vidha. Kriti sadhya means executed by the senses. Bhavet should be sadhya bhava. Sadhya. Sadhya means the results by which bhava or love is acquired. That sadhana abhidha is called sadhana bhakti. So the complete verse that Rupa Goswami gives is Tatra sadhana bhakti kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sa sadhana bhida nitya siddhasya bhavasya prakatyam vridi sadhyatha. When transcendental devotional service by which love for Krishna is attained is executed by the senses, it is called sadhana bhakti, or the regulative discharge of devotional service. Such devotion eternally exists within the heart of every living entity. The awakening of this eternal devotion is the potentiality of devotional service in practice. So the two important points of the definition are kriti sadhya. That means it's executed by the senses. So whatever material contaminated senses one has, one is utilizing those senses. And what is the goal? Or the sadhya? The goal is bhava or love. So these are the two important aspects of this definition of sadhana bhakti. It is executed by the senses and the goal is bhava or prema. Okay, so now let's read from Prabhupada's book. Okay, somebody can read the second paragraph on page number 20. Practice means.
Anu Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Practice means employing our senses in some particular type of work. Therefore, devotional service in practice means utilizing our different sensory organs in service of Krishna. Some of the senses are meant for acquiring knowledge, and some are meant for executing the conclusions of our thinking, feeling, and willing. So, practice means employing both the mind and the senses in practical devotional service. This practice is not for developing something artificial. For example, a child learns or practices to walk. This walking is not unnatural. The walking capacity is there originally in the child, and simply by a little practice, he walks very nicely. Similarly, devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the natural instinct of every living entity. Even uncivilized men, like the Aborigines, offer their respectful obeisances to something wonderful exhibited by nature's law, and they appreciate that behind some wonderful exhibition or action there is something supreme. So this consciousness, though lying dormant in those who are materially contaminated, is found in every living entity. And when purified, this is called Krishna consciousness.
One more paragraph.
Okay, just turning the pages. Okay. These are certain prescribed methods for employing our senses and mind in such a way that our dormant consciousness for loving Krishna will be invoked as much as the child, with a little practice, can begin to walk. One who has no basic walking capacity cannot walk by practice. Similarly, Krishna consciousness cannot be aroused simply by practice. Actually, there is no such practice. When we wish to develop our innate capacity for devotional service, there are certain processes which, by our accepting and executing them, will cause that dormant capacity to be invoked. Such practice is called Sadhana Bhakti.
Okay, so fine. So the point is that Bhakti is naturally, innately, inherently present within every jiva. So it's not something to be got from outside. It's already there. Only thing is we have forgotten or it's covered over. So therefore, Prabhupada is giving the example of the walking capacity of the child. So the walking capacity of the child is already there. And because the capacity is already there, by little practice he walks. And as Prabhupada writes, one who has no basic walking capacity cannot walk by practice. So just like sometimes somebody is born with polio, so then there's no walking capacity. Then how much ever he practices, he can't walk because the capacity itself is not there. But, so similarly, a devotional service can be practiced by any living entity across the world or in creation because that capacity is already there in every jiva. And so therefore, the practices are only meant to arouse that innate Krishna consciousness. So it's not to develop something new. Therefore, Prabhupada writes that Krishna consciousness cannot be aroused simply by practice. Actually, there's no such practice. So it cannot be created. That's the point. It cannot be created by the practice. No, it's already there. It's only awakened or aroused by the practice. And those practices are called as Sadhana Bhakti, by which the dormant capacity to practice devotional service is invoked. Yes. Okay, now read the next paragraph.
Anil Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Every living entity under the spell of material energy is held to be in an abnormal condition of madness. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, generally the conditioned soul is mad because he is always engaged in activities which are the causes of bondage and suffering. Spirit soul in his original condition is joyful, blissful, eternal, and full of knowledge. Only by his implication in material activities has he become miserable, temporary, and full of ignorance. This is due to vikrama.
Vikarma.
Vikarma. Vikarma means actions which should not be done. Therefore, we must practice sadhana bhakti, which means to offer mangala arati, deity worship, in the morning, to refrain from certain material activities, to offer obeisances to the spiritual master, and to follow many other rules and regulations, which will be discussed here one after another. These practices will help one become cured of madness, as a man's mental disease is cured by the directions of a psychiatrist. So, this sadhana bhakti cures the conditioned soul of his madness under the spell of Maya, material illusion.
Okay. So, as Lord Rishabdev tells in the Bhagavatam, Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma yad indriya priti aprinoti. So, in this material world, as Prabhupada is saying here, everyone is pramatta, praprishta rupena matta. Prabhupada says sufficiently mad. And so, because of that madness, what does he do? Vikarma. Nonam pramatta kurute vikarma. Vikarma means activities against the injunctions of the scriptures. For what? Yad indriya prit. Simply for the satisfaction of the senses. So in this world, everyone is mad. Whether one likes it or not, that's a fact. Why? Because just like if you go to a mental asylum, you'll find that somebody thinks and says, I'm Prime Minister, somebody says I'm police inspector, somebody says I'm lawyer, and they seriously believe that. That means in that state of madness, they are accepting a position which they are not in. So they're imagining something. So similarly, in conditioned life also, a person thinks himself to be the body, which he is not. So therefore, it's a type of madness, logically. In a few lectures, Srila Prabhupada talks about his experience in Calcutta, where once a man murdered another person. And so he was brought before the judge. And so the man pleaded before the judge that when he committed the murder, he was somewhat mad, mentally unstable. So the judge called the civil surgeon, as Prabhupada says, and also called the doctor and told him to examine. And so the doctor said, yes, it's true. When the man committed the murder, he was somewhat mad. But then the doctor added, but the fact is that in this world, everyone is somewhat mad. And so Srila Prabhupada says, this is not only what we are saying, even the authoritative doctor says that. In this world, everyone is somewhat mad. And of course, the philosophical reason is this, and that is because most conditioned souls think they're their body, which they're not. And so that's a type of madness. And so just like to come out of madness, a psychiatrist is required and one has to follow the instructions of the psychiatrist. So similarly, to come out of this madness of the bodily concept of life, then one has to consult the psychiatrist, and that is the spiritual master. So that's what Prabhupada says. Here is a man's mental disease is cured by the direction of a psychiatrist. So sadhana bhakti cures the conditioned soul of his madness under the spell of Maya material. Okay. So sadhana bhakti is the cure for our mad condition. And so if we don't take the sadhana bhakti seriously, then we continue to remain mad. And that's what we see. So those who don't practice sadhana bhakti seriously, then they continue to remain in the bodily concept of life, and they behave like mad people. So that's what happens in the material world. We find so much fighting, as we see in the recent times. There's fighting along all the borders. There's fighting India, China, India, Nepal, India, Pakistan, and of course so many other countries. So much fighting. Why? Only one reason: bodily concept of life. This is mine, this is yours, and so there's fighting. So, bodily concept of life. As Prabhupada says, during India-Pakistan partition, there were riots, and people killed each other. I'm Indian, I'm Pakistani, people killed each other, people died, but the land is as it is. Land is as it is, yet people are fighting. Is it not madness? So it's just madness. So madness is due to the bodily concept of life. And so therefore, then when the sadhana bhakti is not seriously taken, then even when the association, we find the same problems. The problems of bodily concept of life. And then same problems when the association of devotees also. So much fighting, this, that. My land, your land. My zone, your zone. So then the same problems come even in the association of devotees. So the basic cause is the bodily concept of life. It's a sort of madness. And so therefore, if one wants to get out of the madness, then one has to take the sadhana bhakti seriously. Then one can come out. Okay, somebody continue reading, please.
Achyut Arjun Saga Prabhuji. Achyut Arjun Saga Prabhuji. Okay.
Sakha, what's the Sakha doing? Brahmachari.
Abhayanand Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Now this
Narad Muni.
Okay, from there. Narad Muni mentions this sadhana bhakti in Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 1st chapter, where verse 32. He says there to King Yudhishthira, my dear king, one has to fix his mind on Krishna by any means. This is called Krishna consciousness. It is the duty of the Acharya, the spiritual master, to find the way and means of his disciple to fix his mind on Krishna. It is the beginning of sadhana bhakti.
Okay, fine. So therefore, Prabhupada is, we'll come to this verse in a second, but then, so therefore is the duty of the Acharya to find ways and means for his disciple to fix his mind on Krishna. That's the beginning of sadhana bhakti. So these are some verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita where it is said, Shravanadi Kriya Tara Swarup Lakshan Tatastha Lakshane Upajaya Premadhan. The spiritual activities of hearing, chanting, remembering, and so forth are the natural characteristics of devotional service. So the marginal characteristic is that it awakens pure love for Krishna. So the activities of hearing, chanting, remembering, they are fundamental, they're Swarup Lakshan, they're primary or fundamental characteristics of devotional service. Because without the Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, not possible to progress. So just like there is the condition of madness, so similarly, sometimes the example is also given of amnesia. Amnesia means forgetfulness. So sometimes when somebody gets a head injury or something, then a person tends to forget and he can't even recognize his parents or his wife, children, whatever. So then what's the solution? Then the man is, then the person is constantly reminded, he's constantly reminded. So he's shown and reminded that these are your parents, this is your brother, this is your sister, and so on. So then by constantly hearing and remembering, then the memory is revived. So similarly, we are also in a state of forgetfulness. We have forgotten who's our real mother and father, where do we belong to. We have forgotten all this, and we are in a state of illusion, imagining so many things. So therefore, we also have to be reminded again and again, we have to be reminded, this is your true father and mother, this is where you belong to, this is your original home. So therefore, in order to come out of this sort of madness or forgetfulness, one has to keep on hearing, chanting, remembering. And so these are the basic Swarup Lakshana of devotional service. Without this, there's no question of progress. There's no question of progress. Sadhana Bhakti means Shravanam and Kirtanam. These are fundamental. Prabhupada has repeated it 1,000,000 times. So therefore, one may say, oh, I'm doing so many services, this, that, everything is fine. But without Shravanam and Kirtanam, there's no devotional service. There's no question of progress. Then all the physical activities, what one is doing, there'll be work. Now, some work is happening, but it can't be called devotional service, because devotional service means there has to be the consciousness. And the consciousness comes by Shravanam Kirtanam. And then the result of Shravanam Kirtanam will be Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sadhya Kabanoy Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karayodoi. Prabhupada quoted this very often. So pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the hearts of the living entities. It's not something to be gained from another source. When the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, this love naturally awakens. So therefore, Prabhupada said, okay, read Prabhupada's lecture.
Abhayan, okay, Abhayan Guruji is right. Beni Madhav Guruji.
Yes. So the fact is that we have got a devotion for Krishna. That is fact. But some way or other, we are separated and we have forgotten. So as soon as by these regulative principles, by the order of spiritual master, by injunction of the Shastras, we begin devotional service that just like our students do here. This devotional service is the pushing process. And as soon as the energy comes, then automatically clock. No more pushing. Automatically this pushing process is required.
Okay, so here Prabhupada, he says that just like a machine, so a machine, it's not working, and then somebody comes and repairs it, and then it starts working, and then automatically, or we can give a more practical example in Indian scenario especially. So we see sometimes a car or a bus, it stops functioning, then everyone gets down from the bus, and then they push the bus, and then the bus starts, and then it starts moving. Once initially it begins, then by the pushing it begins, it starts, and then it continues. So similarly, sadhana bhakti is pushing process. Because why pushing process? Because the natural taste is not there. Or we could say the taste is there, but it is now covered over. We have forgotten. So therefore, some push is required. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada did say, my Guru Maharaj pushed me, I'm pushing you, and then you push others. So therefore, on the path of sadhana bhakti, some push is required. We all require some push. And that's how we tend to make progress. Otherwise, if that little push is not there, one tends to be very complacent. So therefore, some gentle push is required. Otherwise, therefore, spiritual masters and whoever are in leadership position, they need to give some push. Of course, they also require some push, and they need to give some push to the others. So that's how the movement goes. Otherwise, people will tend to become complacent and lazy, and then nobody does anything. So that's sadhana bhakti, because there's not so much of taste in the conditioned state. And so therefore, Prabhupada says the acharya, the spiritual master, then he has to find the ways and means. So the essence of sadhana bhakti is, so in this connection, Rupa Goswami quotes these verses, which we just read. Srila Prabhupada has quoted that, 7th canto, 1st chapter, verse 32. Gopi Dhamma Bhayat Kamso Dvesha Chedyatayo Nripa Sambandhat Vishnaya Snehad Yuyam Bhaktya Vayam Vibho. My dear King Yudhishthira, the gopis by their lusty desires, comes up as fear, Shishpal and other kings by envy, the Yadus by their familiar relationship with Krishna, you Pandavas by your great affection for Krishna, and we the general devotees by our devotional service have obtained the mercy of Krishna. Okay, so he's giving all these examples that all these people, they achieve the mercy of Krishna by different ways. And so this is the 31st verse, and the 32nd verse is the next one. Katamopi navena syat panchana purusham prati tasmat kenapi upayena mana Krishna niveshayet. Somehow or other one must consider the form of Krishna very seriously. Then by one of the 5 different processes mentioned above, one can return home back to Godhead. Atheists like King Yavana, however, being unable to think of Krishna's form in any of these 5 ways, cannot attain salvation. Therefore, one must somehow think of Krishna within a friendly way or inimically. So yes, it is said any of the 5 ways which have been mentioned. But then the point has already been clarified. Therefore, the Anya Vilashita verse is the Paribhasha Sutra. Paribhasha Sutra. Everything else has to be seen in light with the Paribhasha Sutra. So even though this verse says somehow or other, friendly way or inimically, but then we already clarified that right in the definition of pure devotional service. What is that? Anukulyen. It has to be anukul. It has to be favorable. It has to be in the proper favorable consciousness, not inimical. So, and of course, returning back home, back to Godhead, in this case means salvation or liberation. So we know all the demons also get liberation. So, but then the important point here is tasmat kenapi upayena mana Krishna niveshe. This is the essence of sadhana bhakti. The essence of sadhana bhakti is that somehow or other fix the mind on Krishna. And that's what the spiritual master has to do. And that is find ways and means the disciple can fix the mind on Krishna. Of course, there are some common ways and means for everyone. And there could be some specific ways and means for different disciples. So they could be engaged in specific services by which their remembrance of Krishna can be enhanced. Okay. So this point we already made. One's mind should concentrate by using one of the favorable methods, such as affection. Okay, somebody continue reading, please. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Sham Chaitanya Prabhuji.
So now the next question is, so somehow one must fix the mind on Krishna. So how to fix the mind on Krishna?
2 examples.
No, you read from the book, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay. It's the same thing, but anyway, you read from the book.
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us an authorized program for this purpose, centered around the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. This chanting has so much power that it immediately attaches me to Krishna. That is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. Somehow or other, one has to fix his mind on Krishna. The great saint Ambarish Maharaja, although a responsible king, fixed his mind on Krishna. And similarly, anyone who tries to fix his mind in this way will very rapidly make progress in successfully reviving his original Krishna consciousness.
Okay, fine. So as Prabhupada very often said, that the easiest way to remember Krishna is to chant the holy names, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us, and of course using all the various senses and the mind in Krishna's service, as Ambarish Maharaj did. So in this way, by utilizing the senses and the mind and the intelligence and Krishna's service, that's how we can remember Krishna. And so therefore, we have so many different services by which we can try and please Krishna and also remember Krishna. But of course, the important method that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us, as Prabhupada writes here, the chanting has so much power that immediately attaches one to Krishna. And so therefore, the chanting of the holy names is very important. And that is the fundamental and most important instruction that Srila Prabhupada has given us, as we will discuss very soon. Okay, now 2 types of sadhana bhakti. One is Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, that is according to regulated principles, and the other is Raganuga sadhana bhakti. So regarding Raganuga sadhana bhakti, we'll discuss later. So now we are focusing on Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So, of course, the goal is to come to Raga, the Raga Marg. That is our goal. Raga Marg Bhakti Loki Karite Pracharan. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to give us the Raga Marg. Lord appeared to propagate devotional service in the world on the platform of spontaneous attraction. That's the goal. But one cannot jump artificially. So one has to go through the systematic process. So first of all, one has to go through the Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, then only one can come to the Raga Marg. It's not going to happen automatically, and one cannot prematurely, immaturely jump to the Raga Marg. Okay, so the definition of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So Prabhupada gives that in the next paragraph of his book. So, Rupa Goswami defines the first part of devotional service of Vaidhi Bhakti as follows. When there is no attachment or no spontaneous loving service to the Lord, and one is engaged in the service of the Lord simply out of obedience to the order of the spiritual master or in pursuance of the scriptures, such obligatory service is called Vaidhi Bhakti. Okay, so there are three aspects of this definition. One aspect is, at this stage, there is no natural love. There's no spontaneous love or attachment to the Lord. So, because there is no spontaneous love, then what is the impetus to practice devotional service? Two. What are they? The order of the spiritual master and pursuance of the scriptures. So, because of the orders of the spiritual master and the scripture injunctions, then such obligatory service. So, one becomes sort of obliged to practice. So, that's called Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So one may not have so much of taste, but because, okay, I've given vows to my spiritual master has instructed me, the Shastras have instructed, so therefore let me try and follow. So even though there is no natural taste, one tries to follow, and one is sort of obliged to follow. So that sort of obligatory service is called Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it said, Maya Mugdha Jivera Nahi Swata Krishna Gyan, Jivera Kripai Kaila Krishna Veda Puram. The conditioned soul cannot revive his Krishna consciousness by his own efforts, but out of causeless mercy, Lord Krishna compiled the Vedic literature and it supplements the Puranas. So that's Jivera Kripai, that is the Kripa of Krishna on the Jivas. And so therefore is given the scriptures, the Veda and Puran, because without that help, there is no hope for the Jiva. There is no way the Jiva can revive his Krishna consciousness because his Maya Mugdha is immersed in Maya of the material energy. Okay, fine. So we have taken these purports from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So because we are talking about the spiritual master, and so Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti means following the instructions of the spiritual master in the Shastra. So therefore, in that connection, there's a famous verse which Mahaprabhu gives us. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavana Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Beach. So that's the impetus for us to practice Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, the instructions of the spiritual master. And so therefore, this is the purport to that verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, somebody read.
Vikas Rana Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Practice of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti.
No. Okay, yeah, from the screen.
Yeah. The word Guru Prasad indicates that the spiritual master is very merciful in bestowing the boon of devotional service upon the disciple. That is the best possible gift the spiritual master has to offer. Those with a background of pious life are eligible to receive life's supreme benefit, and to bestow this benefit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead sends his representative to impart his mercy. Endowed with the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the spiritual master distributes the mercy to those who are elevated and pious. Thus, the spiritual master trains his disciples to render devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is called Guru Kripa. It is Krishna Prasad, Krishna's mercy that he sends a bona fide spiritual master to the deserving disciples. By the mercy of Krishna, one meets the bona fide spiritual master, And by the mercy of the spiritual master, the disciple is fully trained in the devotional service of the Lord.
Okay, important point to note is, what is the meaning of Guru Kripa? The spiritual master trains his disciples to render devotional service in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is called Guru Kripa or Guru Prasad. So this is the real mercy of the Guru, when the training is there. Because it's only by training that the forgetful jiva understands how to practice devotional service. So without the training, how will the jiva understand? There is no possibility. There is no possibility. Because the jiva is forgetful, as we have just read, Maya Mugdha. By the influence of Maya, he has forgotten everything. So the only way the jiva can revive his Krishna consciousness is by the training which the Guru gives. That's the real Kripa. There's no other sentimental understanding of Kripa. Continue, please.
Bhakti Lata Bij means the seed of devotional service. Everything has an original cause or seed. For any idea, program, plan or device, there is first of all the contemplation of the plan, and that is called the bij or seed. The methods, rules and regulations by which one is perfectly trained in devotional service constitute the Bhakti Lata Bij or seed of devotional service. This Bhakti Lata Bij is received from the spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. Other seeds called Anya Vilashita Bij include Karma Bij and Jnana Bij. If one is not fortunate enough to receive the Bhakti Lata Bij from the spiritual master, he instead cultivates such seeds as Karma Bij, Jnana Bij, or political, social, or philanthropic Bijas. However, the Bhakti Lata Bij is different from these other Bijas. The Bhakti Lata Bij can be received only through the mercy of the spiritual master. Therefore, one has to satisfy the spiritual master to get the Bhakti Lata Bij. Yasya prasadat bhagavad prasada.
Okay, so please note here the definition of Bhakti Lata Bij. Methods, rules, and regulations by which one is perfectly trained in devotional service constitute the Bhakti Lata Bij. Okay, so that's the bij or the seed or the beginning of devotional service. When we understand methods, rules, and regulations, if you don't understand the methods, rules, and regulations, what type of bhakti will perform? Then it'll all be mental speculation. So that's what Prabhupada is explaining here, that if we don't get the Bhakti Lata Bij, we will get Karma Bij, Jnana Bij. Karma Bij means fruitive activities. So in the name of devotional service, we'll be performing fruitive activities or we'll be speculating. There's the Jnana Bij. So therefore, the real meaning of Bhakti, receiving the Bhakti Lata Bij, is to understand the methods, rules, and regulations by which one is perfectly trained in devotional service. So this is the meaning of Bhakti Lata Bij and receiving the Bhakti Lata Bij from the spiritual master. Continue.
The Bhakti Lata Bij is the origin of devotional service. Unless one satisfies the spiritual master, he gets the bij or root cause of karma, jnana, and yoga without the benefit of devotional service. But one who is faithful to his spiritual master gets the Bhakti Lata Bij. This Bhakti Lata Bij is received when one is initiated by the bona fide spiritual master. After receiving the spiritual master's mercy, one must repeat his instructions, and this is called Shravan Kirtan, hearing and chanting. One who has not properly heard from the spiritual master or who does not follow the regulative principles is not fit for chanting, Kirtan. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 2.41, Vivsayatmika Buddhir Ekeha Kurunandana. One who has not listened carefully to the instructions of the spiritual master is unfit for chanting or for preaching the cult of devotional service. One has to water the Bhakti Lata Bij by receiving instructions from the spiritual master.
Okay, so that one receives the Bhakti Lata Bij from the spiritual master, and then one has to follow those instructions. That's the meaning of Shravanam. Shravanam means not just hearing and then not doing anything about it. Shravanam means one hears and follows. Okay, so when one hears, follows, practices, then one becomes qualified for the Kirtan or preaching. Otherwise, without hearing and following, what will one preach? Okay, so therefore, he says, one who has not listened carefully to the instructions of the spiritual master is unfit for chanting or for preaching. What type of preaching one will do? Then it'll all be mental speculation. So therefore, one has to hear properly, one has to apply that, one has to practice that, then one becomes qualified for preaching. Not that, okay, I'll preach without any adhikar. Yes, so Tante Krishna Bhaji Kare Guru Rasevana Maya Jala Chute Paya Krishnera Charan. If the conditions will engages in service of the Lord and simultaneously carries out the orders of spiritual master and serves them, he can get out of the clutches of Maya and become eligible for shelter at Krishna's lotus feet. Okay, now Rupa Goswami gives this as an example of Vedi Sadhana Bhakti. Okay, somebody can read from the next paragraph on page number 22. These principles of Vedi Bhakti.
Siddharth Subudhi Prabhuji.
Yeah. O descendant of King Bharata, one who desires to be free from all miseries must hear.
Oh, wait. Read from Prabhupada's book. These principles of Vedi Bhakti.
Okay. These principles of Vaidhi Bhakti are also described in Srimad Bhagavatam, second Kando, first chapter, verse number 5, where Sukadeva Goswami instructs the dying Maharaj Pariksit as to his course of action. Maharaj Pariksit met Sukadeva Goswami just a week before his death, and the king was perplexed as to what should be done before he was to pass on. Many other sages who also arrived there, but no one could give him the proper direction. Sukadeva Goswami, however, gave this direction to him as follows: My dear king, if you want to be fearless in meeting your death next week, for actually everyone is afraid at that point of death, then you must immediately begin the process of hearing and chanting and remembering God. If one can chant and hear Hare Krishna and always remember Lord Krishna, then he is sure to become fearless of death, which may come at any moment. In the statements of Sukadeva Goswami, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna. Therefore, Sukadeva recommends that one should always hear about Krishna. He does not recommend that one hear and chant about demigods. The Mayavadis, impersonalists, say that one may chant any name, either that of Krishna or those of demigods, and the result will be the same. But actually, this is not a fact. According to the authorized version of Srimad Bhagavatam, one has to hear and chant about Lord Vishnu, Krishna only. So, Sukadeva Goswami has recommended to Pariksit Maharaj that in order to be fearless of death, one has to hear and chant and remember Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna by all means. He also mentions that Supreme Personality of Godhead is Sarvatma. Sarvatma means the super soul of everyone. Krishna is also mentioned as Ishvara, the supreme controller, who is situated in everyone's heart. Therefore, if some way or the other we become attached to Krishna, he will make us free of all danger. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that anyone who becomes a devotee of Lord is never vanquished. Otherwise, others, however, are always vanquished. Vanquished means that after getting the human form of life, a person does not come out of the entanglement of birth and death, and thus misses his golden opportunity. Such a person does not know where is he being thrown by the laws of nature. Suppose one does not develop Krishna consciousness in this human form of life, he will be thrown into the cycle of birth and death involving 84 lakh species of life, and his spiritual identity will remain lost. One does not know whether he is going to be a plant, beast, or bird, or something like that, because there are so many species of life. The recommendation of Rupa Goswami for reviving the original Krishna consciousness is that somehow or other we should apply our minds to Krishna very seriously and thus fearless of death. After death, we do not know our destination because we are completely under the control of laws of nature. Only Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is controller over the laws of the nature. Therefore, if we take center of Krishna seriously, there will be no fear of being thrown back into the cycle of so many species of life. A sincere devotee will surely be transferred to the abode of Krishna, as affirmed in Bhagavad Gita.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So this is the verse which Rupa Goswami is quoting from the second canto of the Bhagavatam. Tasmad bharata sarvatma bhagavan ishvaro hari shrotavya kirtavyascha smartavyaschitta bhayam. So Chetata bhayam bhayam. So everyone is fearful of death. So Parishit Maharaj also, as playing the role of, we can say, a sadhaka or a conditioned soul, is also sort of fearful of death, and therefore he's basically taking to the practice of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. And so therefore Srila Prabhupada is explaining that everyone is fearful of death, which can come at any moment. And so therefore one should be prepared. And how to be prepared? By the process of Vedisarna Bhakti, which involves Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. So as we have been repeating the point, these are the primary processes of devotional service. Therefore, great emphasis has been laid on these processes of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. Without these processes, it is very difficult to progress in devotional service. So therefore, Prabhupada quotes this verse from the Padma Purana and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Smartavya sattam Vishnu vismartavyo najatuchit sarve vidhi nisedasyor etayor eva kinkaraha. Somehow or other, always think of Vishnu without forgetting him under any circumstances. All injunctions and prohibitions are dependent on these two principles. Actually, this is the most basic of all regulatory principles. Or we could say, Sarve Vidhi Nishedasyor Etayor Eva Kinkara. Kinkara means servant. So all rules and regulations are subservient to this one rule and regulation, and that is always remember Krishna, never forget him. So this is the essential practice or essential goal of all practices, of all rules and regulations in the practice of sadhana bhakti. The essential purpose of all rules and regulations is so that we always remember Krishna and never forget him. So we have to remember this point, that our ultimate goal is to remember Krishna. As Krishna says in the 8th chapter of the Gita, famous verses which we've already discussed. Antakale chamameva smaran muktva galebram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nasatar samshaya. And the next verse, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tija ante kalebram. So you find Krishna is saying, whatever one remembers at the time of death, or if one remembers Krishna at the time of death, then one will achieve Krishna. So therefore, we have to remember this most important point, that our goal is to remember Krishna at the time. So if we practice, as Prabhupada explains in those purports, if we practice remembering Krishna throughout our lives, then there's a good possibility that one will be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. So therefore, how we train the subtle body is very important. Not that we simply engage our gross body in services and not take into consideration the subtle body. So ultimately, all services, all rules and regulations are meant to come to the point of remembering Krishna. So if we don't come to the point of remembering Krishna, then yes, then everything is apparently a waste. So as Prabhupada very often quoted this Bengali saying in many of his lectures, bhajan karo, sadhan karo, mrityu janda hoy. Whatever bhajan, sadhan, spiritual activities, whatever you have done will be tested at the time of death. And what is the test? Whether I'm able to remember Krishna at the time of death. That's the test. So therefore, we have to be conscious. We have to be conscious whether I'm actually trying to remember Krishna or am I just mechanically performing activities of Krishna consciousness. One has to be conscious of this, because the ultimate goal is to remember Krishna and never forget him. Okay, so now read the next paragraph from Prabhupada's book in the Padma Purana also.
Vijay Narasimha Prabhuji.
In the Padma Purana also, the same process is advised. There it is said that one should always remember Lord Vishnu. This is called dhyana or meditation, always remembering Krishna. It is said that one has to meditate with his mind fixed upon Vishnu. Padma Purana recommends that one always fix his mind on the form of Vishnu by meditation and not forget him at any moment. And this state of consciousness is called samadhi or trance. We should always try to mold the activities of our life in such a way that we will constantly remember Vishnu or Krishna. That is Krishna consciousness. Whether one concentrates his mind on the four-handed form of Vishnu or on the form of two-handed Krishna, it is the same. The Padma Purana recommends somehow or other always think of Vishnu without forgetting him under any circumstances. Actually, this is the most basic of all regulative principles. For when there is an order from the superior about doing something, there is simultaneously a prohibition. When the order is that one should always remember Krishna, the prohibition is that one should never forget him. Within this simple order and prohibition, all regulative principles are found complete.
Okay, fine. So yes, so that's what Prabhupada is explaining, that there's order and there is prohibition. And within the simple order and prohibition, all regular principles are found complete. That means all rules and regulations are meant to achieve this rule and regulation. Okay, fine. So anyway, that's not so important. And we'll discuss. Okay, so here, Vishwanath Chakravarti makes a point. So he says the word satatam means every day and not every second. Smartavya satatam Vishnu. Since continuous remembrance would be impossible to do in sadhana bhakti, this would produce loss of faith in the rules of bhakti because they would be impossible to follow. So therefore, he says that the word satatam means every day and not every second, because every second or every moment would be difficult on the path of sadhana bhakti. So therefore, at least during certain fixed parts of the day, one must use for exclusive remembrance of Krishna, and that's what Srila Prabhupada has given us. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada has especially given us the morning program and laid great emphasis on the morning program. So this is a time when it is Brahma Muhurta, and so one should utilize this time exclusively for remembrance of Krishna. And of course, similarly, Srila Prabhupada also gave us the evening program, Sandhya Arti and Bhagavad Gita class. So that means that, okay, one is not able to remember Krishna at every moment on the path of sadhana bhakti, but at least one should have certain parts of the day exclusively for remembering Krishna. And if we do that sincerely, then there's a good possibility that during the rest of the day, by the Acharya's mercy, one will be able to remember Krishna. So therefore, it's very important that we follow the Acharya's instructions, because it's only by their mercy that one will be able to remember Krishna. Now, this is Srila Prabhupada's commentary on this verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Please read.
Venudhari Govind Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji, please.
So this verse is a quotation from the Padma Purana. There are many regulative principles in the Shastras and direction by the spiritual master. These regulative principles should act as servants of the basic principle. That is, one should remember Krishna and never forget.
Always.
One should always remember Krishna and never forget him. This is possible when one chants the Hare Krishna mantra. Therefore, one must chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra.
Strictly, you're forgetting important words.
Therefore, one must strictly chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra 24 hours daily. So one may have other duties to perform under the direction of the spiritual master, but he must first abide by the spiritual master's order to chant a certain number of counts in our Krishna consciousness movement. We have recommended that the neophyte chants at least 16 rounds. This chanting of the 16 rounds is absolutely necessary if one wants to remember Krishna and not forget him. Of all the regulative principles, the spiritual master's order to chant the 16 rounds is most essential.
Continue, please.
Or enlist life members or render some other service. But these duties are not ordinary. These duties serve as an impetus for remembering Krishna. So when one goes with a Sankirtana party or sells books, he naturally remembers that he is going to sell Krishna's books. In this way, he remembers Krishna. When one goes to enlist a life member, he talks about Krishna and thereby remembers him. Smartavyam satato Vishnu vismartavyam najatuchi. The conclusion is that one must act in such a way that he will always remember Krishna, and one must refrain from doing things that make him forget Krishna. These principles form the basic background of Krishna consciousness.
Yes, so this is a very important purport which Srila Prabhupada is giving us. And so therefore, the essential goal of sadhana bhakti is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. And how is this going to be possible? So Prabhupada is saying this is possible when one chants the Hare Krishna mantra. Therefore, one must strictly chant the Hare Krishna mantra 24 hours daily. But then he clarifies that and he says that yes, one may have other duties to perform, but he must first abide by the spiritual master's order to chant a certain number of rounds, and that is the neophyte chant at least 16 rounds. This chanting of 16 rounds is absolutely necessary if one wants to remember Krishna and not forget him. Of all the regulative principles, the spiritual master's order to chant at least 16 rounds is most essential. So the most important instruction of the spiritual master is to chant at least 16 rounds. And this is a very important point to understand. Unfortunately, many devotees don't understand. And they think chanting 16 rounds, well, that's okay. If you get time, do it. Somehow do it. No. But this is the Hare Krishna movement. The entire movement is based on chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Without that, it won't be a spiritual movement at all. So it's unfortunate, but yet it's a fact. There's so many initiated devotees. Many initiated devotees, I personally know, don't chant 16 rounds. Or take it so casually. And they think, oh, it's okay, what to do? We're busy with so many things. But Prabhupada is so heavy on this point. When one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, what if we are not able to follow the vows that we took at the time of initiation? Prabhupada thunders. Prabhupada says, he's an animal. Only an animal does not have determination to follow. And then Prabhupada says, then why did he get initiated if he didn't want to follow? He takes vows in front of the Guru, in front of the fire, in front of the deities, in front of the Vaishnavas, and then does not follow? Only an animal will do that. But yet it's a fact. Yet it's a fact that initiated devotees, after taking vows, don't follow. They take it so casually. And as we'll discuss later, this is one of the reasons why the spiritual master then has to suffer. So Prabhupada in one lecture is saying, he's talking about the Christians. So the Christians say, oh, we will perform, we'll do all our nonsense, we'll perform all sins, and then let Jesus suffer for it. So Prabhupada says, what nonsense is this? Is this gratitude to the spiritual master? We'll discuss this point again, it comes in the 5th chapter. But the important point here is that this is the basic and the most important fundamental instruction, because without this, then all the various other services one performs will not be devotional activities. Without that consciousness that I'm performing these services for Krishna, they won't be devotional activities. Then there'll simply be some work. Prabhupada is talking here about selling books or enlisting life members. But he says they're not ordinary activities. Why? Why they're not ordinary? Don't materialistic people sell books? And so many people collect money. Now, Ganesh Chaturthi, Durga Puja, this, that, so many people collect money. So then what makes the difference? The only thing that makes the difference is the consciousness behind performing those activities, as Prabhupada is writing here. These duties serve as an impetus for remembering Krishna. So when one goes to sell books, it's not simply a mundane activity of selling books, but it's distributing Krishna's books, helping me to remember Krishna and helping others to remember Krishna. Similarly, enlisting life members, fund collection, it's not simply about money, money, money. It's about helping people to become Krishna conscious. That's the goal. So if you forget the goal, then it's just ordinary mundane activities. That's all. How much benefit will one get? At most, some agyat sukruti, that's all. But if we want to make them devotional activities where one progresses in devotional service, then one must remember that these activities are meant for pleasing Krishna. They're meant for remembering Krishna. That's the purpose. And that will only be possible, that consciousness will only be possible when one chants at least 16 rounds attentively. Then one can be in the right consciousness as one is performing the other activities. And if one doesn't take care of these things, then the activities will simply be done in mundane consciousness. And in mundane consciousness, there are going to be so many problems. And that's just like in the material world. In the material world, so many problems as people are performing different activities. Why? It's all based on selfishness, it's all based on envy and exploitation and all these negative qualities. And the same thing will come if one is performing so-called Krishna conscious activities without the Krishna consciousness. Then they will again become same, mundane activities without the consciousness. Then the same problems. So much of envy, so much of fighting, so much of exploitation. Why all these problems? Why? Because there is no Krishna consciousness. There's only activity, no Krishna consciousness. But then Prabhupada named the society right in 1966, when there were hardly any people. Prabhupada named the society as International Society for Krishna Consciousness. That's the goal. The goal is Krishna consciousness. The goal is to remember Krishna. If we forget the goal, then it will simply be some mundane organization doing mundane activities, maybe mundane social welfare activities. But the essential spiritual component, the Krishna conscious component, comes from the spiritual activities, namely Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaran. This should always be remembered. And if we forget this goal, then even our society will become any mundane social welfare society. That's all. And we should take care. This has happened to many spiritual organizations in the past. And it will happen to this also, if we are not careful to maintain the spiritual standards. This is extremely important to understand. Okay, we read that. Yes, so therefore, the other important verse quoted from the second canto of the Bhagavatam, Edavan Sankhyoga-bhyam swadharma parinishthaya janmalabha parapumsam ante narayana smriti. The highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. So in the purport, Prabhupada writes, everyone is anxious to achieve the highest perfection of his particular activity, and it is indicated herein that such perfection is Narayana Smriti, for which everyone must endeavor his best. In other words, life should be molded in such a manner that one is able to progressively remember the personality of Godhead in every step of life. Progressively remember. So that means as one is spending more years in devotional service, this should be a goal, how we can increase our remembrance to Krishna. Not that, oh, now I'm initiated devotee, now everything is finished, now I relax. No. Progressively remember. How can I increase that remembrance of Krishna? Okay, now the next point Prabhupada mentions, or Rupa Goswami mentions, is in the next paragraph, this regulative principles. Which regulative principles? Always remember Krishna, never forget him. Is applicable to all varnas and ashramas, the castes and occupations of life. So then Prabhupada describes the 4 varnas and 4 ashramas in detail, so which we have already discussed in our Bhagavad Gita classes, so we won't be discussing that. But Prabhupada here describes the duties of the 4 varnas and 4 ashramas. So this is a quote again from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Atha Pumbi Dvija Shreshta Varnashrama Vibhagasha Swanishritasya Dharmasya Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the personality of God. Okay, so the purpose of all varnas and ashramas is Samsiddhir Haritoshanam, that is pleasing the Lords. Okay, somebody read this.
Shrikant Srinivas Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji, please go on.
The followers of the
Yes, Shari
Varnashrama,
Varnashrami Yadi Krishna Nai Haje Swakarma Karite Se Raurava Padiyaji. Okay, read.
the followers of Varnashrama institution accept the regulative principles of the 4 social orders, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and 4 spiritual orders, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. However, if one carries out the regulative principles of these orders but does not render transcendental service to Krishna, he falls into a hellish condition of material life.
Okay, so the Shastras are saying that if one simply follows Varnashram duties, but one is not trying to please Krishna, remember Krishna, then the result is simply hellish life. Okay, so the purpose of life is not simply to perform Varnashram duties. The goal is to become Krishna conscious. Okay, somebody read this.
Shweta Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji. From the mouth of Brahma, the Brahminical order has come into existence. Similarly, from his arms, the Kshatriya have come. From his wrist, the Vaishyas have come. And from his legs, the Shudras have come. These 4 orders and their spiritual counterpart is Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa, combined to make human society complete. If one simply maintains an official position in the 4 varnas and ashramas, but does not worship the Supreme Lord Vishnu, he falls down from his puffed up position into a hellish condition.
Yes, so again the same point, that if one simply maintains an official position in the Varnashram, that means he performs the Varnashram duties, but he does not worship the Supreme Lord, then he simply falls down into hellish condition. Okay, so now we will read from Prabhupada's book, the last 3 paragraphs from Prabhupada's book for this chapter. Lord Shri Krishna instructed Uddhav. Somebody can read?
Karthik Prabhuji.
And before that, one line before that. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness moment is intended.
Prabhu, 1 minute. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna instructed Uddhava from there.
One sentence before that. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness moment is intended to set the whole of human society in proper condition, so that everyone will be happy and take profit from developing Krishna consciousness. Okay, now you can read. Lord Sri Krishna instructed Uddhava.
Lord Sri Krishna instructed Uddhava that by following the injunctions of the social and spiritual orders of human society, one can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as a result of such satisfaction, the whole society gets all the necessities of life amply and without difficulty. This is because, after all, the Supreme Personality of Godhead maintains all other living entities. If the whole society performs its respective duties and remains in Krishna consciousness, there is no doubt that all of its members will live very peacefully and happily. Without wanting the necessities of life, the whole world will be turned into Vaikuntha, a spiritual abode. Even without being transferred to the kingdom of God, by following the injunctions of Srimad Bhagavatam and prosecuting the duties of Krishna consciousness, all human society will be happy in all respects. There is a similar statement by Sri Krishna himself to Uddhava in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 27th chapter, verse 49. The Lord says there, "My dear Uddhava, all persons are engaged in activities, whether those indicated in the revealed scriptures or ordinary worldly activities. If by the result of either of such activities they worship me in Krishna consciousness, then automatically they become very happy within this world as well as in the next. Of this there is no doubt." We can conclude from this statement by Krishna that activities in Krishna consciousness will give everyone all perfection in all desires. Thus, the Krishna consciousness movement is so nice that there is no need of even designating oneself Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, or Sannyasi. Let everyone be engaged in whatever occupation he now has. Simply let him worship Lord Krishna by the result of his activities in Krishna consciousness. That will adjust the whole situation and everyone will be happy and peaceful within this world. In the Narada Pancharatra, the regulative principles of devotional service are described as follows. Any activities sanctioned in the revealed scriptures and aiming at the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are accepted by saintly teachers as the regulative principles of devotional service. If one regularly executes such service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master, then gradually he rises to the platform of service, serving in pure love of God.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so therefore, Prabhupada says that it doesn't matter what's the occupational duty. Prabhupada says even if there's no need of even designating oneself. So as Prabhupada explains in so many lectures, the whole situation in the modern society is so topsy-turvy, nobody understands who's Brahman, Kshatriya and all that. Finding that out, it becomes very difficult. But in any case, okay, whatever one is doing, as Prabhupada in his lectures, it says, doesn't matter if you're a doctor, you continue your profession as doctor, if you're an engineer, continue, if you're a lawyer, continue. But practice Krishna consciousness. As he says, let everyone be engaged in whatever occupation now has, simply let him worship Lord Krishna with the result of his activities in Krishna consciousness. That will adjust the whole situation and everyone will be happy and peaceful within this world. So the important point, as in the previous paragraph also Prabhupada said, if the whole society performs its respective duties and remains in Krishna consciousness, there is no doubt that all of its members will live very happily, very peacefully and happily. And that also applies to the ISKCON society. So everyone has to perform respective duties and remain Krishna conscious. That's important. As Krishna tells Arjuna, Mam Anusmara Yudhya. He didn't say only Yudhya. That is the duty. Yuddha is there, but remembering me, Krishna said. So that's the Krishna consciousness. Then everyone can be peaceful and happy. So that's the purpose of, so one has to perform the sadhana bhakti along with performing the various duties. And when one is performing the sadhana bhakti nicely, the shravanam kirtanam, then one will be able to remember Krishna as one is performing all one's duties. And then everyone can be Krishna conscious, and that will make the whole society happy and peaceful. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so are there any questions?
Yes, Prabhuji, there are total around 10 questions so far. First one is by Anu Prabhuji, asked at 7:26 a.m.
Okay, so as the initial factor, there is no desire from individual jiva, and it's only causeless mercy of devotee, and it's only God's plan. Should we understand devotional service is not born out of individual desire? Yes, the first contact, we're talking about the first contacts, that is causeless mercy. Okay. And then, of course, then the desire has to be there. Okay, the first contact is causeless mercies. The first touch with devotional service, the first drop of Agyat Sukruti one receives, that's causeless. Then later on, of course, then one has to develop some desire to increase the practice and so on. Okay. can we say that all these devotees were humans in previous life, have got Agyat, Sukruti to come to Krishna consciousness? We can't say that. We have no idea. We have no records. Only Krishna knows that. As we already discussed the point, that it's not necessary that everyone has to have some Agyat, Sukruti from the past. Even if some just come, or someone just comes in touch with a pure devotee, follows instructions, he can begin devotional service. So, as we saw that incident, Prabhupada said, I created the good fortune. So not necessary that everyone has to have some touch from the previous. When performing Rath Yatra, big cities, some people complain traffic jams, fight with devotees. Well, that's besides the point. That's not important. The point is, they hear the Harinam, they see Lord Jagannath, they get some prasad, their Agyat Sukruti begins. That's the point. We're not so much concerned with the fight. Okay. Begins when Agyat Sukruti matures, or begins when unknowingly is engaged. Both are the same. So yes. So the devotional service begins. It begins with unknowingly engaging in some service. And then when that Agyat Sukruti matures, then one develops a taste. And then actually conscious, then it's no more Agyat. Agyat means unknowingly. But when actually the taste develops, then it's not Agyat anymore. Then one is consciously performing devotional service. For that, taste has to be there. But then that taste develops when the Agyat Sukruti matures. All right? How to reconcile causeless mercy with Lord's plan behind every action? Yes. So it's causeless. That's why it is causeless. So we don't know. Yes, Lord has a plan, but we have no access to that Lord's plan. So therefore we say causeless. Is it not like we never get reminded of a constitutional position? We rather accept a constitution. We never get reminded. So that's the reminder, isn't it? The hearing and chanting is the reminder of our constitutional position.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Shall I just
Yes.
elaborate? Prabhu, the example was of a person suffering from amnesia, that we keep reminding him, so he gets reminded. But in our case, Prabhu, it never happens. Even though we keep chanting, we never get reminded of the constitutional position, like we were there in Vaikuntha or not, or anything else. We simply accept
No, but what's our constitutional position?
that we are the servants of the
Yes.
Supreme
So
Lord.
are we not, every time we hear a class, every time we chant, are we not being reminded that we are servants of Krishna?
Yes, Prabhu, we are being reminded, but we never, it's acceptance rather than we get reminded, okay, fine.
Oh, yes. So it will take time for us to accept. To some degree, we have accepted. Do you agree?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes. That's why we are continuing, right? We are continuing to serve. We are continuing to chant. Why? Because we have, to some degree, accepted that we are servants. Therefore, we're trying to practice. And that realization will keep on increasing as we continue the practice.
Okay, Prabhu. Okay.
All right?
Yeah, yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Envy cannot be engaged in devotional service, that Shishpa. Yes, but we know these cases are very special. One reason is they were Jay and Vijay. That's one reason. The other reason is because they were 24 hours thinking of Krishna. They were so envious that 24 hours they were thinking of Krishna. Because they were thinking of Krishna, even in envious mode, they got purified. And that's why they got liberation. Of course, we will discuss that point later on again. But then, of course, it is not that they enter Krishna's abode. Of course, few of them get sarupya, but then mostly they get impersonal liberation. So impersonal liberation, that's not the goal. But then, again, the point is they were continuously thinking of Krishna. Therefore, they got purified. But then we know that our goal is to favorably think. There are streams that reach direct. We will discuss that later on. Raganuga Bhakti, all these Apasampradayas. We'll discuss that when we discuss Raganuga. one gets Bhakti Lata Beach when one is initiated special master initiation here means following the instructions. Yes, that's true. Especially in our movement, even though the formal initiation may not be there, when one begins to follow Prabhupada's instruction, namely chanting 16 rounds, following 4 regulative principles, so he has definitely received the Bhakti Lata Beach because he's following the instructions. Then the ceremony of initiation only becomes an official thing, which is of course also necessary. It's not that it's not necessary. That formal commitment is definitely necessary, but then the initial connection begins when one follows the instructions. Specific time to remember Krishna, one may interpret that instead of chanting only he can read. Oh yes, that is correct. So when we talk of Shravanam Kirtanam, it includes everything. So therefore, our morning program includes chanting the holy names. It includes Bhagavatam class, then evening Bhagavad Gita class. So everything is included within that Shravanam Kirtanam and remembrance.
But Prabhuji, like somebody may think that I can skip chanting and read only Bhagavad Gita.
But then we already read that. What does Prabhupada write? In that purport, we read that. What is the most important instruction of the spiritual master? Huh?
To remember Krishna always, and chanting is the basic principle.
Now, what is the most important instruction we read in the purport?
Chanting.
Yes, the most important instruction of the spiritual master is to chant at least 16 rounds. We already read that. There's no excuse for that. Then everything else follows. That is the first instruction Prabhupada writes. Okay. So when it's first instruction, it has to be given top priority, not that first instruction last priority. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, okay.
Everything instruction is in Shastra. How to understand? Revealed. Of course, this point also will come up later. Revealed scriptures, because scripture is also like a personality. We say that. Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, non-different from Krishna. So Krishna is realized by, Krishna is understood by revelation, correct? Divya Gyan Hridhe Prakashito, it's revealed within the hearts. Or as the other verse, Atha Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhavet Krayam Indri Sevan Mukhe Jivado Swayam Eva Sfurtyada. It's revelation. It's revelation. So therefore, Shastra is non-different from the Lord, and so therefore Shastra also can be understood by revelation. We discussed that point when we're discussing Bhagavad Gita. Gyan and Vigyan. So therefore, we read, then we follow, and then when we follow, we get purified, and then one gets realization. So the knowledge has to be revealed. Otherwise, if one simply reads and memorizes and writes exams, that all is okay. But if there's no revelation, then one will not be able to follow anything.
So, Prabhu, revelation, can we take that it is revealed by the revelation, can we take that it is revealed by Lord?
Yes, yes. Yes, we discussed that point. Realized knowledge comes by the grace of the Lord and the spiritual master when they are pleased with our devotional service.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's all.
So far, yes, Prabhuji.
Good.
There is one more question, Prabhuji, by Venudhari going through. It's just coming. One more has come in after that.
Okay, some devotees say initiation is formality, holy name is sufficient. We'll discuss this point. This point we will discuss. And just to give a precise answer now, Rupa Goswami, when he begins describing the 64 angas of bhakti, the first thing is taking shelter of the Guru, getting initiated. So yes, the formal initiation is required. Rupa Goswami's direct instructions. No other evidence is required. It's Rupa Goswami's direct instructions. Even though we don't have taste, we have to force ourselves to do Shravanam Kirtanam. First way, yes, that is what Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Instruction. You've already studied, right? So the famous 7th verse, Yat Krishna Nama Charitati Satapya Vidya Pitto Pataptara Sanasya Narochikano Kintwadarat Anudinam Kalusaiva Jushta Swadvi Kramat Bhavati Tat Katamudantri. So there Rupa Goswami is explaining. Yes, we don't have taste. Why? Because we are disease condition, jaundice. But then just like the remedy for jaundice, even though sugar candy is bitter, but the remedy is continue to take the sugar candy. So similarly now also, Kintu Adarat Anudinam. So similarly, even though we don't have the taste because of the disease condition, but what's the solution is to continue with respect, with attention, anudinam, every day, regularly. So that's therefore the instructions have been given by Srila Prabhupada and the spiritual masters. Yes, so therefore every day Bhagavatam class, Bhagavad Gita class, reading of the books. So yes, chanting the holy names. So the instructions are there, so we have to follow, whether we like it or not, if we want to make progress. And then the taste will gradually develop. All right.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay, fine. So if there are no more questions, we will conclude for today. And we will continue with, so tomorrow we'll be covering 3 chapters, 3, 4, and 5. So if you have time, do read and come. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai. Shri Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.